certain days that when you're fishing, have baits at all different depths of the water column. Because some days, fish aren't going to hit on top. And then all of a sudden, that downrigger keeps going off, and you get a pattern there. And when I see that when I'm fishing, I immediately deploy my downriggers. And I even have a couple super planers that are like big planers that are almost the same type as a downrigger. They have the same purpose. They don't go quite as deep. And I'll use my downriggers real deep, and I'll use those at a mid-level. And I've even used just regular egg sinkers weighted on the line on some occasions, especially if I'm drifting or something, and I want to get a good stag, the bait staggered out there kind of where they're just far enough away where they won't get tangled up. And it really makes a difference sometimes. Sometimes the downriggers aren't working at all, and I'll pull those up and not even use them and just use all flat lines, something near the surface, either something real close to the boat, or something real far away from the boat. But I can't stress enough about the downriggers. If you're going to try to do a lot of king fishing, get something that can get the bait down in the water column. Even if you're going to fish two lines, one line on top and try to get something down a little bit, they do make a difference. In Biloxi, when we fished in November, and even the year before, the downriggers made the difference. We fished two lines both days. The bite was so strong that you could put it on the downrigger. You did not even have to deploy the rod in the holder. You could just hold it on your waist and wait for the strike. I mean, 10 seconds to 50 seconds, it was almost guaranteed. We were just using ribbon fish because we were using ribbon fish and blue runners, and a blue runner is the type of bait, it's a real big bait. You can't use it on a downrigger too well because no matter how fast you troll, that blue runner can swim faster than the boat. And what he does is just tangle himself around the downrigger. And especially over there when you got real big baits and real hardy baits, they're not going to work on a downrigger. I mean, you can clip their tails and clip everything and try to get them where they're just swimming, but like I said, you got to have these downriggers. There's no doubt. I mean, if you don't have a downrigger, super planer, every tackle shop in town has a super planer, and it's basically, you put it in the water, it has a clip, exactly like a downrigger, and you clip the line onto it, ease it down behind the boat, and when the fish strikes, it'll pop right off that super planer, and you could just jerk the super planer, it'll come floating back up top so you can pull it in real easy. One thing about the downriggers is when you get a strike on a downrigger, immediately pull the downrigger up. If you don't pull that downrigger up after the initial strike, you're asking for the fish to it's just an invitation for them to get off, because a lot of kingfish, they'll run straight away from the boat and then they'll come straight back to the boat. And if that line touches that downrigger cable or any type of friction down there at the speed that kingfish is going, the line is popped every time. We lost numerous fish in Biloxi when we were trolling around boats. Only 30 and 40 yards separates boats fighting fish, and you got a downrigger down and they're just looking at you shaking their head because one of the two guys is going to lose their fish because it's going to cut the downrigger, get cut on the downrigger. A couple other things you need on your boat is I highly suggest anybody that's planning on keeping any kingfish, get a gaff. I don't care if it's a little teeny gaff like that, but you need a gaff if you plan on keeping some kingfish. I don't recommend anybody that hasn't fished for them or never caught one to attempt to try to tail one or try to grab it in the water. Kingfish is exactly like a barracuda mouth, except the teeth are smaller and there's a lot more of them. And you get your hand anywhere near his mouth and he happens to make a motion, you're going to be heading in early. Go get some stitches in your hand. Now, but if you're not going to keep them, I highly suggest, just cutting the rig. Usually, when the fish strikes on a rig and there gets some kinks in the rig, I don't recommend at all using a rig. At all. I don't care if you had one little piece of the hook caught in his back. I don't ever recommend reusing the rig. I recommend, salvaging the hooks and everything you can, and maybe getting a new rig out there, making a new rig. Because that fish may have come at it from an angle, and it may have came at it and just kinked that wire a little bit. And like I said, you deploy that bait out there, 5 minutes later, the biggest king you ever seen comes and rolls, hits that one rig that was hit before, and he's not on there anymore. And you're wondering why, and that's probably one of the reasons why. And another thing that's good on a small boat, especially, and especially tournament stuff, is get a fish bag. There's about 5 or 6 different companies that are nationwide that carry an insulated fish bag. It's a nice thing. It's about 5-6 foot long. You can actually get them pretty much made any size you want to. And they're perfect for boats that don't have a big cooler capacity for any type of fish. I mean a dolphin, wahoo, kingfish. You could take this bag, unfold it when you get a fish in the boat, 2 bags of ice and 15-pound kingfish, and you can lay that thing on the bow of your boat all day in the sun. As long as that thing's zipped up and it's a fairly good shape insulated fish bag, that fish is going to be perfect all day. When you get back to the dock, it's going to be like he was buried in ice in a big fish box. I highly recommend you get that. That's pretty much, I covered the gear. Does anybody have any questions on some of the type of gear I covered?
How many rigs do you usually take out with you, and what have you found to be the best way to sell them?
As far as selling, you said
The stow rigs.
I'm going to talk about the rigs. I have a whole section on rigs.
Okay.
It depends on if I'm fishing in a fishing tournament or if I'm fun fishing. If I'm fishing in a fishing tournament, I will not get on the boat without 50. I know that may sound like a lot. I was first day in Biloxi, first day of the tournament. I went through 60 rigs in 2.5 hours. And all I did the rest of the day was sit down like this, and thank goodness it was calm, because I didn't do nothing but tie rigs for 3.5 straight hours. And as soon as I had one ready, we put it out. Matter of fact, my crew, Scotty and Kelly, they were waiting on a rig for me to get it on the, make it so they can put a line out. That's how strong the bite was. I've only witnessed a couple strong bites like that here, which involved a lot smaller fish than over there. But the fish over there, when they're biting, and they're big ones. I don't know. I mean, we caught some fish that I wouldn't believe you could catch, and they're biting. They were jumping. I mean, you would just like ride down and see 10 skyrocket within a matter of 5 minutes, just flying out the water. I mean, it was pretty incredible to witness the fishing that was in Mississippi past November. But anybody else have any other questions? Yeah.
Try that super braid, definitely.
I've never used the super braid. Kind of new to me. I know it works real good in the blue water trolling, but I've never tried it. I know if you have a reel that doesn't like to hold a lot of line, you can buy some of that, and I know you can really get your yardage on a small rod and reel. I know it's real tough. I'm not sure how good a visibility is. I'm kind of a person that wants to be kind of real stealthy when it comes to kingfishing. Well, I'm going to talk about leaders. Case in point, it all depends on what the fish, where I'm fishing at. If I feel like the fish are not leader shy, then I'll put a real long leader, 3-4 feet. But if I feel like they're real leader shy, I may use a kingfish rig that's maybe only 12-14 inches, including the hooks and swivel and everything. It's just a matter of trying new things, and I have different size rigs. And when I said something about the 60 rigs, I saw the one guy shake his head. You know, a lot of them rigs are not rigs that are just set rigs. They're all not 60 of them exactly alike. I mean, I'll have double rigs, single rigs, naked rigs, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute about the rigs.
Yes, when you talk about using downer rigs, what size of ball are you talking about using? What speed are you talking about trolling?
Well, normally in slow trolling, which means 1 to 2 miles an hour, occasionally it might be 3 or 4 miles an hour, depending on what kind of bait it is. And when you're slow trolling that slow, and the conditions are relatively calm, you really don't need a real big downrigger ball. I like to use the 6-pounders. That's the ones I really like. 8s and 10s are kind of heavy, and they just hurt more when you drop them in the boat or drop them on something. And I can tell you that the 6-pound ones that are at Boaters World pretty much everywhere, they're the red ones, and I've had success. Now, if it's real rough and I may be trolling a little bit faster, I do have some 8-pounders I like to use too. And as far as being the pancake kind or the round kind, I've really never used anything but just the round kind. Anybody else think?
When you're down or cakes?
cable, do you stick with the original cable or do you change it for monofilament?
Well, when I first started, I did a lot of research and read a lot of stuff, and everything I read says change it to 150 feet of 150-pound mono. Well, the first time we qualified to go to the national championship in Fort Pierce about 4 years ago, I decided I was going to take a look at all the other boats, all the big contenders, and a lot of the pros that were down there, and I didn't see one of them with mono on their line. And I can tell you, mono affects brands of downriggers. If you have a Canon downrigger and you put mono on it, the spool's going to swell up. But for some reason, the Penn ones, you put mono on a Penn downrigger, and that spool, for some reason, is going to stay true. It's just a matter of that line. I don't know what it is on the Penn. They use a different material on their spools, but I've had the problem with the Canon downriggers when you put that mono on there. I've even soaked the mono for 3 weeks in a bucket full of salt water, and it still swells the spool up. But luckily, Canon's got a lifetime warranty on their stuff. You can send it to them and just say, they'll ask you if you put mono on it. I'm not going to tell you the answer I gave.
Send this video to Canon.
Anybody got any other questions before I move on?
Up in the length of the gaff, you talked about the different sizes.
Yeah.
Do you use longer
I
ones?
use a long gaff. I mean, my boat, I can't use the longest gaff as I would. One thing good about my boat is my boat sits real low to the water, and an 8-foot gaff is plenty long for me. Now, I know a lot of people that have a contender or something that's got some real high gunnels, and they don't get it quite as close as the fish as I would when I'm reeling it in. It's just because my boat sits so much lower in the water. But I know a lot of guys use a 12-foot gaff. I have a 4-foot gaff and I have a 6-foot gaff. It all depends. If I'm fishing in a fishing tournament, I'm going to make sure I got the longest gaff I can get. But if I'm just fun fishing, I got a 6-foot gaff. Or a lot of times when I'm fun fishing, about 95% of the time, if I'm fun fishing for kingfish, I'm not going to really keep them. So I have a big tagging stick, 8 foot long, and I used to do a lot of tagging. And I just release them. But as far as the gaff goes, I just recommend if you're gonna try to fish in a tournament, try to find something you're comfortable with at first. Don't go out there and buy a 12-foot gaff and you've never gaffed a fish with it. Because I can tell you there's 3 or 4 different brands of gaff, and one of them weighs about 5 pounds and the other one weighs about 15 pounds. And if you're not used to using it, I mean, you can go to throw it in the water and gaff fish, and that fish take off, and you got a real heavy gaff, and you're not used to it. It'll take the gaff right out of your hands to get something that's real green. But as far as the gaff, like I said, I try get a gaff and try to get the feel for that one. Gaff and some fish with it, and you'll feel what's comfortable for you. But I use an 8-foot gaff when I'm gaffing. It works real good for me.
You're talking about all downriggers. Are you using any outriggers at all?
Outriggers?
Yes.
No, you said outriggers?
Right.
No, outriggers are basically put on the side, and they're mainly used by a lot of blue water fishermen just to get the bait and be able to fish more lines at one time. I mean, outriggers are made, you can get an outrigger with 3 different clips on it, and you can control 3 rods on each outrigger. They're mainly just to get the baits further away from the boat. By all means, you can use them. They are a little bit harder to use when you're live bait fishing if the weather's not real calm, due to the fact that you just have more stuff in the air, and there's be a little bit more drag for your live bait when he's trying to swim in the water.
On the downriggers, is it better to use one that's like a 24-inch extension on it versus an 18, like a Canon Mini Fold 2? If you were going to spend, like, let's say, $150 for the Mini Fold 2 versus $300 for one of the others, is there a difference in what that fish might do as far as the outrigger with that particular outrigger?
No, there isn't no difference. There isn't a difference at all. It's just a matter of, like I said, find out what works on your boat, first of all. And like I said, when that fish hits that downrigger and that line pops off and your reel starts screaming, the first thing, your first instinct, especially if there's 2 people, the first instinct for one of those people is to crank the downrigger up. Foremost, I would crank it up before I even pick the rod up. You want the downrigger out of the way. I prefer it out of the way, turned out of the way so it's not even leaning over the water anyway. If you're fighting a fish, you have a chance of rubbing that line against that cable.